Welcome to True Crime Her Story. Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for the full story behind the headlines, a story that matters. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to help keep her memory alive. November 13th, 2024, Northeast Charlotte, North Carolina. The clock read just before 3:30 p.m. when the quiet of a Wednesday afternoon was about to be shattered forever. At the Ascent at Mallard Creek Apartments on Strive Street, residents were settling into their midweek routines. Children walked home from nearby schools, the autumn air crisp and peaceful in this tree-lined community just off Mallard Creek Road. Inside apartment walls, families prepared for evening dinners, homework was spread across kitchen tables, and the gentle hum of suburban life carried on as it had countless times before. But in one apartment, 33-year-old Jamisha Wilkes was about to face a conversation that would end her life. Her 7-year-old daughter Serenity waited inside, unaware that her mother was stepping into danger. Within minutes, the sound of gunshots would pierce the afternoon calm, and a community would be forever changed. Jamisha Wilkes was a woman who found beauty in the details. At 33, she had built a life centered around simple joys that reflected her optimistic spirit. Her apartment was filled with bright, vibrant colors that seemed to capture sunlight even on cloudy days. Friends who visited always noticed the puzzles, intricate 1,000-piece masterpieces spread across her dining table, evidence of her patient, methodical nature. She would spend hours carefully fitting pieces together, finding satisfaction in creating order from chaos, one small piece at a time. Music filled her home constantly, whether it was R&B flowing softly in the background while she cooked dinner, or upbeat songs that made her dance around the living room. Jamisha believed music had the power to heal and uplift. Those who knew her said she had an infectious laugh and a smile that could light up any room she entered. But above everything else in Jamisha's world was her daughter, Serenity. At 7 years old, Serenity was nonverbal and autistic, requiring specialized care and boundless patience. Where some might have seen challenges, Jamisha saw only her beautiful daughter who communicated in her own unique way. She had learned to read Serenity's expressions, gestures, and sounds like a language only they shared. She was the light of Jamisha's life, her mother, Deidre Howard, would later say. Every morning, Jamisha would help Serenity get ready for school, carefully brushing her hair and making sure she had everything she needed. Evenings were spent together on the couch. Serenity curled up beside her mother as Jamisha read stories aloud, or they watched cartoons together. Single motherhood hadn't been easy. Jamisha worked diligently in Charlotte, balancing the demands of her job with the specialized needs of raising a child with autism. She researched therapies, attended school meetings, and advocated fiercely for Serenity's educational needs. Friends marveled at her dedication, watching as she turned down social invitations to stay home with Serenity, or spent her weekends at speech therapy appointments instead of relaxing. The community around the Ascent at Mallard Creek knew Jamisha as the friendly neighbor who always had a kind word. She was the mother who helped other children in the complex when they were locked out, who shared groceries when families were struggling, who remembered birthdays and celebrated small victories with her neighbors. Her caring nature extended beyond her own family to anyone who needed support. In her quiet moments, often late at night after Serenity had fallen asleep, Jamisha would return to her puzzles. Each piece represented hope. Hope for Serenity's continued progress, hope for their future together, hope that the foundation she was building would be strong enough to weather any storm. She was saving money for Serenity's future, researching the best programs in schools, planning for the day when she might need more specialized care. Despite the challenges of single parenthood, Jamisha was building something beautiful. She dreamed of giving Serenity the best possible future, of watching her daughter grow and thrive in her own special way. Her small family was her world, and she protected it with the fierce love that only a devoted mother could understand. This was the life Jamisha had carefully constructed, one filled with patience, love, and unwavering devotion to the daughter who meant everything to her. It was at work in Charlotte that Jamisha first met Decian Fontaine Maddox. At 32, he seemed like everything she had been looking for. Charming, attentive, and genuinely interested in her life. Their relationship began naturally, the way many workplace romances do, with friendly conversations during breaks that gradually became longer, more personal discussions about their hopes and dreams. Maddox was easy to talk to. He listened when Jamisha spoke about Serenity, asking thoughtful questions about her daughter's progress and showing what seemed like genuine care for their small family. He made Jamisha laugh during stressful workdays and offered the kind of emotional support she hadn't experienced in years. For a single mother who had shouldered everything alone, his attention felt like a gift. What Jamisha didn't know was that Maddox was living a carefully constructed lie. Just 30 minutes away in Concord, he had a wife and a family of his own. He had perfected the art of compartmentalizing his life, keeping his marriage and his affair in separate, sealed worlds. When he was with Jamisha, he spoke about the future as if he were single, available, and ready to build something real with her. Their relationship deepened over months of stolen moments and secret dates. Maddox would visit Jamisha's apartment, spending time with both her and Serenity. He seemed comfortable around her daughter, patient with her nonverbal communication, and supportive of Jamisha's role as a devoted mother. To Jamisha, it felt like she was finally building the family she had always dreamed of. Then came the pregnancy. When Jamisha discovered she was carrying Maddox's child, she expected joy, celebration, plans for their future together. Instead, she found herself facing a man she barely recognized. The caring, supportive partner she thought she knew disappeared, replaced by someone desperate and demanding. Maddox pressured her relentlessly to terminate the pregnancy. He spoke about timing, about not being ready, about how a baby would complicate everything. But Jamisha, strong in her convictions and her faith, refused. She had already raised one child as a single mother. She could do it again, if necessary. She told Maddox she would raise the baby on her own, sparing him any involvement if that's what he wanted. But Jamisha's moral compass pointed in a different direction when it came to honesty. She insisted that Maddox come clean to his wife about their affair and the pregnancy. This wasn't just about the baby. It was about truth, about doing what was right, about not building a future on lies. This demand became the breaking point. Maddox, who had managed to keep his double life hidden for so long, now faced the complete destruction of both worlds he had created. His marriage, his reputation, his carefully maintained facade, everything would crumble if the truth came out. The pressure mounted as Jamisha held firm to her principles. In the days leading up to November 13th, the tension between them escalated. Maddox grew increasingly desperate, more demanding, more volatile. He couldn't accept that Jamisha wouldn't abort the baby, and he couldn't tolerate her insistence on honesty. The woman he had once charmed with his attention now stood as the greatest threat to everything he had built. What Jamisha saw as basic human decency, telling the truth, taking responsibility for their actions, Maddox viewed as an ultimatum that would destroy his life. The secret he had worked so hard to protect was slipping away, and in his desperation, he began to see only one way out. November 13th, 2024 began like any ordinary Wednesday at the Ascent at Mallard Creek Apartments. Jamisha had gotten Serenity ready for school that morning. Following their usual routine of breakfast, careful hair brushing, and making sure her daughter had everything she needed for the day. The autumn air was crisp but pleasant as residents went about their normal activities. Children walking to nearby schools, adults heading to work, the gentle rhythm of suburban life continuing as it always had. Earlier that day, Maddox had already begun unraveling. He had confessed to a family member about his affair with Jamisha and her pregnancy, the weight of his double life finally becoming too much to bear. But instead of bringing him relief, this confession seemed to intensify his desperation. The truth he had worked so hard to hide was beginning to surface, and he saw his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Just before 3:30 p.m., Maddox arrived at the Ascent at Mallard Creek Complex on Strive Street. Neighbors later described seeing him approach the building, his intentions hidden behind a facade of normalcy. Inside her apartment, Jameisha was going about her afternoon routine. Serenity was home from school, safe in their familiar environment, filled with bright colors and the gentle sounds of their daily life. When Maddox knocked on the door, Jameisha had no reason to suspect danger. This was someone she had trusted, someone she had believed cared for both her and Serenity. When he asked her to step outside, perhaps suggesting they needed to talk privately, she complied. She left Serenity inside the apartment, expecting to return in just a few minutes from what she thought would be a conversation. As Jameisha made her way toward her car in the parking lot, the afternoon quiet was about to be shattered forever. Maddox, driven by desperation and the fear of losing everything, had made a decision that would destroy multiple lives. In those final moments, Jameisha was still the loving mother who had spent years building a life for her daughter, still the caring woman who believed in doing what was right. The sound of gunshots echoed through the peaceful complex, a sound that would haunt the neighborhood forever. Maddox fired multiple times, striking Jameisha down in the place where she should have been safest, her own home. But his violence didn't end there. In a calculated move that revealed the premeditated nature of his crime, he took Jameisha's cell phone and ran it over with his vehicle, destroying potential evidence that might link him to the murder. Inside the apartment, 7-year-old Serenity waited for her mother to return. In her nonverbal world, she had no way to understand the horror unfolding just outside their door. The child who depended entirely on Jameisha for love, care, and protection was now alone, unaware that her mother would never come back inside. Neighbors heard the gunshots piercing the midday calm. Residents who had been going about their ordinary Wednesday routines suddenly found themselves witnesses to unthinkable violence. Emergency calls flooded into 911 as the peaceful apartment complex transformed into a crime scene. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department officers arrived to find Jameisha lifeless in the parking lot, her gunshot wounds fatal. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. The autopsy would later confirm not only her death, but also that of her unborn child, adding another layer of tragedy to an already devastating loss. The woman who had spent years carefully putting together puzzles, who found joy in bright colors and music, who had devoted her life to caring for her special needs daughter, was gone. Her dreams for Serenity's future, her hopes for their growing family, her plans for the baby she carried, all of it ended in a parking lot on a Wednesday afternoon because she had insisted on truth and honesty. The murder of Jameisha Wilkes might have remained unsolved longer, if not for Maddox's own conscience beginning to tear him apart. Earlier that day, he had already confessed to a family member about his affair with Jameisha and her pregnancy. The weight of living a double life had become unbearable. But rather than bringing relief, this confession seemed to push him toward the irreversible decision he would make at the apartment complex. After fleeing the scene of the murder, Maddox couldn't escape what he had done. Within hours, he reached out again to the same family member, this time admitting to something far more horrific. He confessed to shooting Jameisha and destroying her cell phone. The family member, horrified by what they were hearing, immediately contacted authorities. But Maddox's carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling from multiple directions. His wife, learning about the affair and the violence through a devastating phone call, contacted 911 within an hour of the homicide. Her call provided crucial details that would help investigators piece together the timeline and identify Maddox as the primary suspect. Police tracked Maddox to Cabarrus County, where he was arrested without incident. A search of his vehicle revealed damning evidence: the firearm used in the murder and the remnants of Jameisha's destroyed cell phone. The physical evidence, combined with his own confessions, created an airtight case against him. Meanwhile, Back at the Ascent at Mallard Creek Apartments, little Serenity was left to navigate a world that had suddenly become incomprehensible. In the days and weeks that followed, her grandmother, Deidre Howard, would heartbreakingly recount how the 7-year-old struggled to understand her mother's absence. "Mommy went outside and never came back in," became Serenity's poignant way of expressing the void that Jamisha's murder had left behind. The community was stunned. This quiet residential area where families felt safe and children played in the courtyards had become the scene of intimate partner violence that claimed not just one life, but two, Jamisha and her unborn child. Local media outlets including WCNC, WBTV, and WSOC-TV covered the case extensively, highlighting the intersection of infidelity, domestic violence, and murder. Neighbors who had known Jamisha as the friendly woman who helped others and adored her daughter struggled to reconcile the tragedy with the person they remembered. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Homicide Unit worked meticulously to piece together the full timeline, confirming that there had been no prior reports of violence between the couple, making the murder seem even more shocking to those who knew them. On November 14, 2024, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department announced Maddox's arrest, initially charging him with first-degree murder and robbery with a dangerous weapon. By November 28, prosecutors filed an additional charge of murder of an unborn child, reflecting the full scope of the tragedy that had devastated two families. The legal proceedings stretched across 10 months, a painful journey for Jamisha's family, who attended hearing after hearing, seeking justice for their daughter and granddaughter. Throughout this time, Serenity remained under her grandmother's care, learning to live in a world without the mother who had been her everything. On September 4, 2025, the case reached its conclusion in Mecklenburg County Court. Decian Maddox, now 33, stood before the judge and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, murder of an unborn child, and robbery with a dangerous weapon. The plea deal spared both families the trauma of a lengthy trial, while ensuring accountability for his crimes. During sentencing, Maddox addressed the court with words that carried both remorse and a recognition of the irreversible damage he had caused. "I'm sorry for taking her life," he said, apologizing to both his own family and Jamisha's loved ones. He expressed hope that one day he might share his story as a cautionary tale to deter others from similar paths. The courtroom was heavy with emotion as Jamisha's mother, Deidre Howard, delivered her impact statement. Through tears, she spoke about the daughter she had lost. She was loved, she was caring, she was a great mother. She was my baby, and she did not deserve this at all. Howard described Jamisha as funny, quiet, and quirky, qualities that made her irreplaceable in their family. But Howard's most devastating words came when she questioned the very nature of justice itself. What does justice look like when someone is taken, especially from a 7-year-old? Her question hung in the courtroom air, highlighting the impossible reality that no sentence could truly restore what had been taken from their family. The judge sentenced Maddox to 25 to 31 years in prison, crediting him with 294 days already served. He was immediately taken into custody to begin serving his sentence in a state facility. Outside the courthouse, Jamisha's family gathered in a show of solidarity, their grief visible, but their unity unbroken. For them, the plea represented a step toward healing, but the void left by Jamisha's murder remained unfillable. Jamisha Wilkes should be remembered for the life she lived, not just the way it ended. She was a devoted mother who found joy in puzzles and bright colors, who danced to music in her living room, and who loved her daughter Serenity with a fierce devotion that knew no bounds. She was the neighbor who helped others, the woman who believed in honesty and doing what was right, even when it cost her everything. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the hidden violence that can lurk beneath seemingly normal relationships. In North Carolina and across the country, intimate partner violence remains a critical issue, particularly for pregnant women who face heightened risks during what should be the safest time of their lives. 7-year-old Serenity now faces a future without her mother's embrace, a heartbreaking reminder that domestic violence destroys not just the victim, but entire families. If you believe stories like Jamesha's deserve to be told, don't just watch, honor her memory. Like this video, share it, and subscribe so these tragedies are not forgotten. And tonight, check on your loved ones. Really check. Look for the signs that someone might be hiding their pain behind a smile. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous relationships are the ones that seem safest from the outside.